adventure, mystery, and nature, events that touch our lives every day. Science, finance, politics, we have the best for kids. With quality in all we do, it's clear that we're committed to bringing you the best. GPTV.
Bringing you the best, GPTV, on Channel 8, WGTV Athens, Atlanta.
From the Georgia State Capitol in Atlanta, this is Election 90, a student political forum. Here is your moderator for the evening, Chief Washington Correspondent for the McNeil-Lehrer News Hour, Judy Woodruff.
Hello, and welcome to our program. For the next hour, students will be questioning 8 announced candidates for the Republican and Democratic gubernatorial primaries. Planning deadlines did not allow for inclusion of more candidates. The sponsoring organizations would like to acknowledge the candidacy of Carol Ann Rand, who is running for governor on the Libertarian Party ticket. Tonight's forum is just part of a statewide instructional project to increase student awareness and knowledge about political issues. Our audience consists of outstanding students from all around the state. Our panel is also made up of leading students from Georgia high schools. Now let's meet the candidates. Their seating was determined by a random drawing. We're going to introduce them to you by party, Republicans first. Bob Wood is the former Gwinnett County School Board Chairman. Greeley Ellis is the former Superior Court judge from Covington. And Johnny Isaacson is the state representative from Marietta. And the Democrats are Lieutenant Governor Zell Miller, Roy Barnes, state senator from Mableton, Mayor Andrew Young of Atlanta, State Representative Lauren McDonald of Commerce, and finally, Lester Maddox, former governor. Now let's meet our panel of students. Greg Reese is a senior at Clarkston High School in DeKalb County. Greg is hearing impaired, and he will be assisted by sign language interpreter Nancy Holdren. Denisha Perkins is from Marietta, Georgia, where she's a senior at Sprayberry High School. Denise Thompson is a senior from Tift County High School in Tifton. And Benjamin Edwards is a senior at Northeast High School in Macon. All the questions tonight will deal with economics and education. Here's how the first round of questioning will work. Each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to the same question. The time allotted for each response will be 1 minute. Greg Reese will ask the first question, and Lieutenant Governor Miller will be the first candidate to respond. Greg?
Lieutenant Governor Miller, do you accept the idea that there are two Georgias, a prosperous North Georgia and a semi-economically deprived South Georgia? If so, what would you do as governor to close any economic gap?
Instead of talking about those two Georgias, I'd rather talk about the two Georgias, the Georgia that is and the Georgia that can be. And to bridge that gap, what we're going to have to do is to invest more in education. In this state, our infrastructure in education is not what it should be. Our SAT scores are 48th in the nation. We're 42nd in the nation as far as what we put per pupil for students. We can do better than that, but we're going to have to make some very different changes. We're going to have to do some things differently in new ways. And that's why I have proposed a state lottery for education. It would be our fourth largest source of revenue. It would bring in $250 million new dollars. I'm tired of seeing Georgia money going to Florida to educate Florida kids. And I'm tired of this state spending $900 per pupil, less than the national average.
Thank you. Mr. Wood, your response.
Thank you. Greg, I commend you. That's a very timely question. Let me say that you could divide any geographic section into any number of parts that you wanted to. You could say the 2 Georgias or the 10 Georgias or whatever number you want to. We're one Georgia, and we're all in this together for economic prosperity and to help the families further the cause of family love and prosperity within the individual families. We need to look carefully throughout Georgia to try to spread the wealth and spread the economic opportunities. One of my programs that'll help do that is a very innovative plan whereby every Georgian will have the opportunity to go to college on a work-study program. I worked for 8 years through college at 40 hours a week to get my degree, but every parent and every grandparent would realize if Bob Wood was your governor that regardless of your swinging up or swinging down economic family cycle, your kids will have an opportunity to go to college.
Judge Ellis.
I know what you mean by the question, but I cannot accept the proposition there are 2 Georgias. I'm the only candidate in the race from South Georgia, having grown up in deep South Cook County. I've lived in Cuttington, east of Atlanta now, for the last 30 years, and I have a cabin in the North Georgia mountains, which I enjoy very much. As your governor, I see all of Georgia as one Georgia. I want all of Georgia and all Georgians to benefit in the economic growth of this state, and as governor, I'll promote economic growth throughout the state by assuring good schools, good law enforcement, health care, adequate skilled labor, all the things necessary to assure economic growth in each corner of the state.
Senator Barnes.
Well, I don't think that anybody that travels this state can deny the fact that there is a part of Georgia that is prospering and a part of Georgia that is not prospering. And I suggest to you that the key to that and the key to the solution to it is in education and retraining those that we have failed, that is the adults who are functionally illiterate. 35% of the adults in this state are functionally illiterate, and making sure that we educate those that are coming along to meet and to fill the jobs that are being attracted to Georgia. The other thing that we have to address if we are to attract industry to rural Georgia is that we have to keep children in school. Georgia has the 4th highest dropout rate in the nation, and it must be addressed. How do we find the money? Not through a gimmick, but through reprioritizing our funds.
Mayor Young.
When I pastored 2 little churches down in South Georgia, I was 35 years ago. There were very good roads. But as I drove down there last week, those roads are very much the same. While north of Atlanta, we've got an elaborate road system, and that elaborate road system has helped bring business. We also have a very wonderful infrastructure of colleges and universities stretching across North Georgia. We don't have those same kind of technical and educational opportunities for students in South Georgia. I think we've got to bridge the gap between the 2 Georgias. We don't want 2 Georgias. We wish there were not 2 Georgias. But there's no question in anybody's mind that things are different in the smaller cities and rural areas of our state. And what I would like to do is be personally responsible for bringing new business, new industry, and helping our well-trained workforce to produce the goods and services that the world needs.
Representative McDonald.
I think there's definitely a portion of our state that has not been as economically viable as this particular region that we're in right now. I think that transportation was the basic infrastructure that built Atlanta and this region as to what it is. I think that we've certainly got to recognize that our educational system has got to continue to progress in order that there can be a trained workforce in all regions of our state, both not only in the elementary and secondary level, but in our adult educational programs. The state of Georgia, with the governor, with a partnership in order to help build those particular infrastructures, recognizing the needs, helping with the leadership in those areas, can certainly see that all parts of Georgia can prosper, as does this particular region that we're in right now.
Governor Maddox.
I don't really see the emphasis on two Georgias that I read about and heard broadcast and talked so much about. I believe it's been overemphasized. If we have two Georgias, we have about 4 Atlantas in different categories, economically and socially and a lot of other ways. And I think the key is to education. As governor, I've talked to people across the nation and the world, and they look at our system of education, and they sometimes know more about what we're doing in education than some of our people in education know. And so I say that we do the job there. We had a surplus of teachers. We attracted teachers. We had a breakthrough in higher education and budget that still stands. And to bring in the industry, we did more than the previous 20 years combined. We can do the job, but it takes chief executive leadership that has quality experience to do the job as it needs to be done.
Representative Isaacson.
There's no question that from an economic standpoint there are two Georgias, and there's no question that our theme of a new partnership for Georgia is the solution. The old partnership in Georgia has taken an area that might have been economically deprived and said, we'll send you a grant to tide you over. We can't afford that anymore. We can't make those kind of mistakes. What government has to do is become a partner with local government in areas that need growth, a partner that provides wastewater treatment loans and advances and grants so that industry can be attracted, a partner that ensures there's transportation access, a partner that ensures the state, while passing higher standards in education, passes on additional the money that it needs to make those higher standards work in Georgia. Yes, we are one Georgia, and we need one marketing plan where our government is a partner with our citizens, with our local communities, and with all our state.
Thank you. Denisha Perkins will ask the next question, and Representative Isaacson will be the first candidate to respond. Denisha?
Representative Isaacson, should there be a Georgia state lottery? If so, should revenue be designated for education? And should Georgia voters have the opportunity to vote on a lottery referendum?
Denisha, I'll answer it in the inverse order. Yes, the people of Georgia should have the opportunity to vote. In 1976, when I was first elected, what happened was the first question was asked is, can we have a lottery? For 14 years, the people have never had a chance to have a voice. Now is that time, and they should have. Secondly, if the people decide to pass that referendum and license the lottery, then the money that's raised should go, as all money's raised, to the highest priority of state government, which is the education of our children and the fulfilling of our promise of QBE. Third, in terms of should we or should we not have a lottery, let me answer that by saying this. We don't need to gamble on education. We sell people that a lottery is going to solve our educational problems, and we're fooling them. What's going to solve our educational problems are a commitment on the part of state government to fund it. But it is a revenue source, and if the people of Georgia license it, it should go to our highest priority of public education.
Governor Maddox.
I certainly agree that under the Constitution of both Georgia and the United States of America, that the people have a right under that Constitution to that vote. It should not be in the hands of the governor. It would not be in the hands of the governor. Only the House and the Senate and the General Assembly can pass the resolution for the referendum. And if the people vote upon it, we'll have it. In addition to I don't think there'll be any improvement from education from it. We're talking about $250 million, because in addition to the $250 million that they're talking about, it could be $150 million. And then in this instance, it would, we could wind up with a lot less money and a lot more misery. We could talk about $1 billion a year in misery for the people who get in it or not able to provide themselves for it. But I support the lottery, and they should have the opportunity to vote on it, and the people who support it, that I've talked to across the state, they support it, and I go along with their right to vote on it.
Representative McDonald.
As a member of the House Industry Committee in the 1990 legislative session, I voted to let the people of Georgia make the decision on the lottery. I do not agree that it ought to be dedicated revenue. I think the funds ought to go into the general treasury of the state, and then it be appropriated accordingly. I think that if we're committed to education, we'll commit those necessary dollars with or without the resources of a lottery. Let me say one thing, though. You know, when you talk about what a lottery and whatever level of revenue that it might produce, it takes about $24 million for a 1% teacher pay increase. If it produced $150 million, that would be a one-time 6% increase for teachers, and you've spent those dollars forever. They're not there anymore.
Mayor Young.
Well, I think the people of Georgia ought to have a right to decide about a lottery. And if they decide to have a lottery, then I think those funds ought to be dedicated as additional funds for education. But I think we ought to understand that that's not an answer to our problems in education, nor is it an even partial solution. It would take us probably 3, maybe 5 years to get any revenue back from the lottery. I think we've got to have funding immediately to improve education. And I think that's going to take strong executive leadership. I've managed a government. The city of Atlanta was a $1.2 billion government. And I was able to find within that government, through management, money for the priorities we had and money for the priorities of the people. I think we've got to start immediately to finding ways to fund higher education, technical and vocational education, which is the quickest return on our investment, and kindergarten through 12th grade education as well.
Senator Barnes.
I don't personally favor a lottery. I believe a lottery is deceptive in the way that it's sold. It's deceptive in the benefits that it says that it may bring to a state. If a lottery were put in this state, it'd run the school system about 5 days, and that's all. Secondly, I think it sets the wrong values. It tells our young people, it tells the people of the state that there is a way to get rich quick for nothing, and it appeals to the worst instincts in us. I have always favored what is called public initiative, where people have the right to petition and vote on any issue, but it should not be limited solely to the lottery. It should be a right to vote on whether, for example, the lieutenant governor or speaker can serve 16 years, or whether a sales tax increase ought to be put into effect, or whether a dome stadium ought to be built. So, and if it is placed into effect, if it is passed, then I will regulate it, but I do not believe that it ought to be dedicated solely to education, because I believe it is deceptive.
Judge Ellis.
I think the people should have the right to decide whether we'll have a lottery or not. In making that decision, I would give this word of caution. The proceeds from a lottery will not solve our revenue problems. Even though $100 million is a lot of money, compared to a $7.5 billion budget, it's not that much. Considering the fact that we're spending about $3.5 billion a year of state monies on education now, another $100 million will not be a significant increase. As to dedicating those funds, I'm generally opposed to dedicated funds. I think all funds should be appropriated according to priority. And secondly, by dedicating funds, you take the chance of creating the illusion among the people that the educational problems are taken care of by the lottery. That would not be true. In the long run, it could hurt our educational system.
Mr. Wood.
I'm basically opposed to gambling. I think some people, unfortunately, can't handle it. Instead of buying milk for children, they may be using that money to gamble. However, I do think that the people of Georgia have a right to decide on the issue of lottery. And yes, I do think it should be committed very firmly to education and education only, because if on the ballot it's not committed to education, then in this building the decision will be made, and behind some green door that King Tom Murphy is in charge of, who is the only member of the House of Representatives, and nobody in the House is doing a whole lot to change that, unfortunately. But let me also say that these closed doors, we need to open these doors and let the sunshine in so the people will be involved and knowledgeable of what's going on with the decision-making process. to show you my opinion at a meeting we had recently of the gubernatorial candidates, excluding Mr. Miller here. They would not allow citizens in or the news media in, so I had to absent myself and walk out, and Andy Young said, "I admire your courage," and I appreciate that, Andy.
Lieutenant Governor Miller.
More than a year ago, when I proposed a lottery for education, I was a lone voice crying in the wilderness. I'm glad to see tonight that I've got some company. Of course we should have a lottery in this state. 80% of the people who live in the United States already can participate in a lottery. Why should Georgia be part of that 20% who cannot? We should have a lottery, and the proceeds should go to education. Not into the general fund for education, of course, but for new and creative programs, like volunteer pre-kindergarten programs, like cash bonuses for math and science teachers, like cash bonuses to schools who can decrease the dropout rate dramatically, like summer enrichment programs. These are the things that we should use the lottery money for, not put it into the general fund on one end and take it out on the other.
Thank you. We've now come to our second round of questions. Again, each candidate will have the opportunity to respond to each question. But this time, response time is going to be cut in half and limited to 30 seconds. Denise Thompson will ask the first question in this round. Mr. Wood will give the initial response. Denise?
Mr. Wood, during the administration of Governor Harris, much emphasis, excuse me, much emphasis has been put on QBE, quality basic education. How would you, as governor, go about ensuring that QBE programs are fully funded?
It's a very good question, Denise, and I understand you're a state officer of the FFA. I was a member of the FFA in Thompson, Georgia, as I was growing up in East Georgia. Very timely question. QBE needs some modification, especially in the funding formula, because some of the counties are now having to pay in exorbitant sums in order to help the remainder of the state. We need to moderate it to some degree. We must realize that education is the most important function of the state government. And if we don't educate the folks in our state, then we're not going to have a bright tomorrow. It's nice to see these wonderful faces of our future, as I mentioned to Lieutenant Governor Miller.
I'm sorry, it is 30 seconds. Judge Ellis.
I'm sad to report that after this last session, still QBE is underfunded by $90 million per year. As governor, I would fund QBE by cutting the waste from our state budget. If we cut that waste by only 10%, we'd have enough money from that source alone to raise our expenditures per pupil in this state to the national average.
Senator Barnes.
The question of funding QBE is determined by whether the General Assembly will establish spending disciplines. The first thing we have to undertake is to cut out some of the things that are held so dear in this capital. For example, pensions. Lieutenant Governor Miller, for example, would receive a pension of $50,000 if he retired this year because of his part-time service. If he serves one term as governor, he would receive a pension of $100,000. We should not allow those programs like that to exist, and we should cut them out to spend them on education.
Mayor Young.
Well, I would fund QBE, but I think funding alone is not going to be the answer. I think it's going to take strong executive leadership. It's going to take a commitment on the part of the governor, the business community, particularly parents, and the support mechanism in the community working with our teachers and our students. It's also going to take a commitment on the part of students. You know, students can read, students can go to the library, and none of that costs money.
Representative McDonald.
There has never been a program in education that has received the response, the initiative that the Quality Basic Education Program has received. The Georgia General Assembly is very much on a track in fully funding the QBE programs. We have changed things in Quality Basic Education simply because of the experience of the program that was put into place, and have felt like that other things would be better invested. But we are very much on track in our funding program, and I think the commitment is there.
Governor Maddox.
I think QBE is a step forward in education. We had great advancements during the previous administration that I had, but the problem is, as you've heard here before, is inefficiency and waste and decisions made by politics instead of what's business-wise and efficient-wise. And that my experience has put me in a position of being what I term an expert in cost control and efficiency. I'd like to implement that and move education forward again, and I believe I can do it.
Representative Isaacson.
As governor of Georgia, I will establish the per-pupil expenditures that need to be there to fully fund QBE. That number will be published. If we fail to meet it through legislative process, I'll use the line item veto and send it back, so we veto golf courses and vote for children and take QBE to where it is fully funded for all Georgians.
Lieutenant Governor Miller.
It's a matter of priorities. Of course we should fully fund QBE. We should have fewer $35,000 prison cells and more $35,000 teachers. But there's some things also in QBE, some things left out in QBE. For instance, at-risk students. We need to provide more counselors for our schools so that we will be able to do something about the potential dropouts. We also need to do more about teacher salaries. I think teacher salaries is by far the most important thing you can do to improve education.
Thank you. Benjamin Edwards will ask the next question. Governor Maddox, you will have the first opportunity to respond. Benjamin?
Governor Maddox, where in your administration would the problems of cleaning up our environment and safely disposing of hazardous waste rank? And how would you fund environment programs?
I would call upon the entire segment of our society, industry and business and government, and particularly the environmentalists. They've been in the forefront for years while others have been in the background, and because of the fight that they have waged, we're much further advanced in doing something about an environment than we would have been otherwise if we left it to the politicians. It would be a top priority under the Maddox administration. I try to eat clean, drink clean, talk clean, live clean. I want clean air and clean water, and I'm going to fight for it.
Representative McDonald.
One of the first things, Georgia has some significant laws in place dealing with control, governing of our natural resources and the inspection of. We need more inspectors. We need more personnel in the Department of Natural Resources for this type of work. And the second thing, of course, is that we need to develop partnerships with people in industry and work with them because they want to have a state. Industry wants to have a state that's clean, that's fresh, that streams are in place, and we've made a lot of progress in that, and we've got to work at it in that direction, not just totally mandated.
Mayor Young.
The first bill I introduced when I went to Congress was a bill to make the Chattahoochee River corridor a national park. The first thing I did as mayor was to separate the Department of Public Works into Environment and Streets and Water and Pollution Control, because I knew the difficulties of our clean water and also our need to handle the sewage that grew with our development. I would say as governor, I would work with business to solve the problems of our environment. Just as we had a phosphate ban in the city of Atlanta, I would work with business to make sure that they too finance a clean environment.
Senator Barnes.
The greatest shame that exists in this state is the way the environment is dealt with and treated, and particularly the way that city of Atlanta dumps raw sewage into the Chattahoochee River and poisons the 72 miles that exist between Atlanta and West Point Lake. I have suggested not only will we require local governments to clean up the water sources and the sewage that are put into the river, but we will have an environmental sinking fund funded by state, local, and developmental private money to be able to build and expand wastewater treatment plants.
Judge Ellis.
The state of Georgia now ranks 10 among all the 50 states in pollution. That's embarrassing to me, and as your governor, I will see that protecting our environment does have very high priority. The obligation for protecting our environment, however, is the responsibility of each of us, individuals, businesses, and whomever. We must all do our part to eliminate as much waste as possible and adequately dispose of what is left.
Mr. Wood.
In my administration, Benjamin, it would have one of the top priority spots. And the reason being, of course, is that we're a product of our environment, and with a clean environment, so can we be, and contrary to that, equally so. We need to teach our children that the environment is what we get our sustenance from, and we must see it as important. Children no longer are being taught that as much as they should. As to who should pay for it, the people who are creating the problem should be assessed the fees necessary to pay for the problem to be corrected.
Lieutenant Governor Miller.
The environment's going to play an important role in this campaign for the first time in this state, and well, it should. One of the things that we need to do is to make sure we have more staff within the Environmental Protection Division within the Department of Natural Resources. We've got to have more inspectors. We also should even study and examine and consider whether we want to make the Environmental Protection Division a separate agency of DNR. I'm not sure we should, but that's something that we certainly should look at. And one thing we should not do, and that is allow other states to dump their toxic waste in Georgia.
Representative Isaacson.
As your governor, I'll do what I've done as your legislator, such as this year's water conservation bill, which I passed, which caused the hiring of not one new employee or bureaucrat, but is a private sector solution to better management of our water. Second, we have 755 governments and cities and counties in this state, and it's far too many to solve all the problems of the environment. Regional solutions in landfills, in solid waste, and in wastewater treatment is an essential economic solution to solve the problems of our environment.
Thank you all. Greg Reese will ask the next question, and Judge Ellis will have the first opportunity to respond. Greg?
Judge Ellis, although estimates on the number of dropouts in Georgia vary, there seem to be agreements that our state has among the very worst high school dropout rates in the country. What is your plan to reduce Georgia's dropout rate?
Actually, Georgia graduates only two-thirds of its students. One-third drops out each year. We must arouse the curiosity and interest of the children early. We must reduce the pupil-teacher ratio and focus on the basic skills. Teach them to read. If they can't read, they've got to be very frustrated and can't proceed on with other courses. We need more counselors in the early grades. We need to emphasize the importance of learning and do all we can to keep those students in school.
Senator Barnes.
Really, the figures I've heard are that Georgia has a 38% dropout rate, the fourth highest in the nation. I think there are three things that we need to do. We need to create joint programs between high schools and vocational schools to give an alternative to those children who are dropping out, that if they go to a vocational school, they will get a high school diploma along with a vocational certificate. Secondly, we need to expand counselors in middle schools. And thirdly, we need to reduce the pupil-teacher ratio in the first 5 grades to 1 to 15 so that children get a good basic start.
Mayor Young.
I think we need to concentrate on the middle school years. I think we concentrate our resources, our remedial training, on young people in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. Then they won't be dropping out in 9th, 10th, and 11th grade because they'll understand what's going on. We had a camp in the summer, Camp Best Friends, where we had 14,000 students in an enrichment camp. I think that kind of program, working directly with our students. Also, I'd like to see some of our veterans coming back into the schools, more men in the schools in the middle school years.
Representative McDonald.
We've taken some tremendous steps in solving this problem. Number one, of the influence of the counselors in the middle school and the elementary schools in this last legislative session, a program for in-school suspension, whereby that a person that is acting up is not put out of school, but in-school suspension so that they can continue to learn in the process. And second, I think that we've got to motivate, and as a governor, to help motivate students that they do want to participate in what direction they want to go, whether it's vocational or higher education.
Governor Maddox.
I think the situation dealing with the dropouts, we can look at some outstanding Georgians here on the panel and guests, because they didn't fail in the first grade or the second grade. They were taught, and they enabled them to concentrate and to read. And if they miss it in the first 2 or 3 grades, they're potential dropouts. and their wasted lives. And we have a prison problem and a crime problem because of those dropouts. So I'd say we go back to the first couple of grades and reduce that pupil-teacher ratio, not through remedial reading, but teaching them that to concentrate and
Time is
read,
up.
and they can go from there and make it.
Thank you. Representative Isaacson.
This year in the General Assembly, I introduced legislation to give a positive identification to academic students that are achieving just like we currently give to athletes. Positive reinforcement is number one. Second, grades K through 5 are absolutely essential. Special instructional assistance and help for the classroom teacher when early learning problems are identified is the single most important thing we can do, and invest our money. A child lost is lost early, not late.
Lieutenant Governor Miller.
Dropouts just don't occur when a kid gets to be 16. You can identify a potential dropout when he's 7, 8, 9 years old. That's why this volunteer pre-kindergarten program that I've talked about, paid for by a lottery, would be so very important. Statistics have shown that students who go to pre-kindergarten usually finish high school. I would also come up with some vocational education options, and of course we need more counselors.
Mr. Wood.
I saw a poster on the wall of a third-grade student next door to my little boy Bobby's third-grade class that said, "I wish I had some money so I could stay in school." Unfortunately, too many children don't have the incentives necessary to stay in school. The parents need to recognize, for instance, they can go to college through a work-study plan. I'm told from teachers that I've worked with that you can recognize dropouts by normally around the third grade. We need to have a concerted effort toward helping these people and their families so that we don't have as many dropouts.
Thank you all. Denisha Perkins will ask the next question, and Representative McDonald will be the first to respond. Denisha.
Representative McDonald, the days of the big budget surpluses are at an end here in Georgia. The current state budget is very tight. What is your chief plan for economic growth and for boosting state revenue?
Well, Denisha, I think one of the greatest things that we can do is, of course, take advantage of the new European marketplaces that are going to be opening up. Sell Georgia products. You know, the strongest growth that we can have is when a small business expands, or when a product of one of our industries has an opportunity for a new marketplace. I think there's a tremendous opportunity to sell Georgia products all over this small world that we presently live in, and I think that's be one of the top priorities to advance our economic development program in our state.
Mayor Young.
You know, Georgia has a very smart workforce and has some very hard-working, honest people. That's one of the reasons why business comes to Georgia. I would continue to bring business to Georgia. The 1996 Olympic Games will showcase Georgia. And I think we're going to see that Georgia will be growing with the kind of promotion that I could give. I also think we can double Georgia's exports. We can sell twice as much carpet, chicken, pecans, soybeans, whatever, all over the world.
Senator Barnes.
I too agree that we should be aggressive in our exports. But one of the things we need to understand, instead of going all the way around the world to Japan on trade missions or anything else, the statistics show that 80% of all new jobs created in Georgia are created by those who are already here, or businesses already here having less than 20 employees. We should pay particular attention to helping local small businesses to expand employment.
Judge Ellis.
We need to expand markets for goods and products we're now producing to increase production and provide more jobs. We need to increase our exports of various goods and products manufactured and produced here. We need to attract new industry by making the state attractive and offering a good business climate for those looking for a place to locate their industries.
Mr. Wood.
I'm a small businessman, and small businessmen employ more people in the state by far than the number of big industries that we have. We need to get the government out of business and let business operate on a free enterprise system, in addition to going as far as we have to go and working as hard as we can to get all the new industry we can to provide jobs and opportunities for all Georgians.
Lieutenant Governor Miller.
3 quick things. Encourage existing businesses to modernize and expand. 2, increase startups of new businesses. 3, attract new businesses that are high growth, like biomedical and telecommunications and computers. I would like to see, and whenever I'm governor, I'm going to work towards a research quadrangle made up of Emory, Georgia Tech, the University of Georgia, and Georgia State that will rival and surpass the triangle at Raleigh-Durham.
Representative Isaacson.
The question dealt with a tight budget, and the way you manage a tight budget is to manage efficiently the programs that are already operating, and that's the very first thing I'll do to find new money. The second thing you do is you have an aggressive policy in your state to expand your existing business. But let me tell you, business comes where tax policy is good economic policy, and Georgia has far too long wasted supplemental budgets getting into businesses the private sector does. We need to invest that money in reserves for our children and budget tightly so we have the new money in the future for the new programs we need.
Governor Maddox.
The world market is very important, and we've got to some way reach more of that market, and we can through adequate promotion and bringing it to the attention of the world. What we have, nobody can beat us in many of our products. But you know, job creation is the answer, and without job creation, that's why we're declining in our commercial, industrial, and residential development this time, why our revenue is going down. We've got to have job creation, and during my administration, we did, I say again, we got more dollars for new and expanded industry in 4 years than the previous 20 years combined. It needs to be done again.
Thank you all. Denise Thompson will be our next questioner. Denise, Senator Barnes will be the first candidate to answer.
Senator Barnes, drugs continue to be a major problem for schools and for all of society. How would you, as governor, deal with Georgia's war against illegal drugs, and would a tax increase be needed to fund future drug war programs?
I think there are three things that we can do to meet and beat the drug problem. One is we have to have enough prison beds to lock folks up and keep them there if they're caught for selling and distributing drugs. Secondly, we have to expand our treatment facilities specifically for adolescents. We ought to do that by an add-on fine to those who are caught for possessing drugs. And thirdly, we ought to have an aggressive forfeiture program in which we take the property away from those who sell and distribute drugs. That money will be more than sufficient to meet the needs to fight this war.
Mayor Young.
Yeah, drugs are dumb, and there's no place in Georgia's schools for that kind of stupidity. And you, the students, need to decide that and make it very plain. We also know that drug education works, and we ought to start drug education at a very early age so that young people respect their bodies as the temple of God and don't defile their bodies with drugs or alcohol or cigarettes.
Representative McDonald.
It's something that all of us can agree on, that it is our #1 problem right now is the drug issue in our state. And it's not immune to any particular community. We've made some strong initiatives in this last legislative session, passing many bills dealing with the problem. We got to reduce the demand. We got to take the demand away, and we got to penalize people that participate in it for profit.
Governor Maddox.
Drug situation in Georgia, along with crime, they're related together. We're losing the battle, continuing to lose that battle. And a lot of lives are being lost. I would think that as governor, I would bring the media and industry and business and educators and the church and as much as we can from the home into a combined organization to awaken the young people to the tragedy of a life lost on drugs, and then on the other side, the greatness of being well-behaved and being successful in life.
Representative Isaacson.
As your governor, I'll do everything to focus on people not using drugs to start with, but I'll also do one additional thing. We need to back law enforcement and the judiciary and give them the prison cells so when they sentence a person for dealing drugs, they serve a time on the first offense. It's a time they started picking up the trash on our roads if they sell drugs, rather than picking up and leaving an overcrowded jail because state government hadn't done its job.
Lieutenant Governor Miller.
A 4-point program. 1, set up boot camps all over this state where all first-time nonviolent drug offenders would do time cleaning up the environment of Georgia. I would make it as much like the Marine Corps boot camp that I went through at Parris Island as I possibly could. 2, I would put in place drug rehabilitation clinics in every one of our regional hospitals. 3, I would put a drug education program in every grade, in every school, in every classroom in this state, and I would pay for it with the state lottery. And the fourth thing I would do is I'd make sure that all of our law enforcement officers had whatever tools they needed to enforce all the drug laws all the time in every neighborhood.
Mr. Wood.
We need to attack the problem from both sides. That is, the families need to get together and the schools to educate the children as to the dead-end street that drugs are. The other day I wrote a letter to the Commissioner of Prisons and asked him why we can't build lesser expensive prisons, which I expect to hear announced soon. When I was in the Air Force, I served in a tent. They didn't call it cruel and unusual punishment. We can put some offenders in tents if necessary so we'll have enough room so we'll never have another early release program.
Judge Ellis.
As 11 years as a judge in Superior Court, I saw the end results of drug use. As governor, I would eradicate the drug problem insofar as I could by educating the people on the harmful effects of drugs and by providing treatment for those who are addicted to drugs. And third, by assuring swift and certain punishment for those caught using or selling drugs.
Benjamin Edwards will ask the final question. The first candidate to answer will be Mayor Young. Benjamin?
Mayor Young, considering the relatively low teacher salaries in our state, how would your administration go about attracting college students to enter the teaching field in Georgia?
Well, I think I would take a tip from Georgia Southern. Georgia Southern is already recruiting bright high school students like yourself and giving them 4 years of scholarship in exchange for 4 years of teaching back in your hometown. I think that'll work. I also think that we can bring some of our retired military people who are retiring at 40 years old, and they're doing that up at Augusta College, giving them college degrees and bringing them into the school system. A retired second lieutenant's pay or a retired corporal's pay plus a teacher's salary is good pay.
All right. Senator Barnes.
Two things. One is I would implement a program that said to any child that comes from a family of having less than $40,000 of income or less a year would have the opportunity to go to a public school or public college in this state in which their tuition, books, and board would be paid. Secondly, I would create education fellows where we would take the best and brightest students, give them $20,000 stipends per year to attend college and to stay into education.
Judge Ellis.
First and most importantly, I think I would improve the education, that is the image of education and the image of teaching as a profession. And of course, I would try to increase the pay of beginning teachers and also provide scholarships to attract more to the teaching profession.
Mr. Wood.
The pay for teachers obviously is going to have to be increased. We need to do some study in the working environment of teachers so that it's conducive to teaching instead of turning in reports, which is too much of today. We need to make it attractive for teachers to work. We need to give them objectives and leave them alone in the classroom so they can teach one-on-one, which is, after all, the mission of teaching. We need to have programs to encourage kids to go to college to become teachers, and my work-study program will do that.
Lieutenant Governor Miller.
Our teachers don't get the respect nor the pay they deserve, and I'd try to change that whenever I'm governor. You know, we don't think a thing about paying a brain surgeon $200,000 a year, and yet a bad teacher can screw up more brains than a brain surgeon ever could. It starts and stops with salaries. But it shouldn't just be across-the-board salaries. I don't think you should pay teachers right across the board. I think they should have career ladders. I think it should be a merit pay system.
Representative Isaacson.
We lose more of our teachers at the 14th or 15th year to administrative jobs or other professions because Georgia basically financially stops its incentives for teacher pay. The most important thing Georgia's governor can do is pay the career teachers so they stay to retirement in the 30th year. I agree with the remainder of things that have been said about scholarship programs and incentives, but we don't need to do anything more important than to see to it we reward those who are already teaching and educating our children by making it a career and making it worthwhile.
Governor Maddox.
During my previous administration, prior to that, they predicted we have one of the greatest teacher shortages ever in this state, and we wound up with a surplus. we increase the salaries of teachers. You've got to be competitive, or they leave the job, or they never come into it. And then another way, the increase of percentage of the budget, the revenue coming into the state, it's been declining for years and years and years, and increase it a percentage, 1 percentage point annually until we move it back up and take care of the teachers and our children.
Representative McDonald.
When you look in your life and you want to see what type of career that you want to have for yourself, you're going to look at the whole spectrum. I told teachers of Georgia last year that I was going to see that a salary increase was weighted toward the veteran teachers. This was done in the 1990 legislative session. I think that we've got to show that to our best and our veteran teachers so that they can see that they can have a career and have the freedom to do what they're professionally trained to do, and that's teach our young people.
That wraps up our time allotted for questions. Now each candidate will have 1 minute each to make a concluding statement. The order of the closing statements was determined by a random drawing. Mayor Young will go first.
I come from a family of educators. Education was always the priority in my family. My mother was a teacher, my grandfather was a teacher, my wife is a teacher, and now my youngest daughter is a teacher. We know that the only way to end poverty, the only way to create job opportunity is through education. And so I pledge to you to work with you. It's not just what we promised, but what we have proven. I proved 35 years ago in Thomasville, Georgia, that we could take kids from Thomasville and Beachton and get them into colleges all over Georgia, and now they're fine, upstanding, contributing citizens. I also proved here in Atlanta that we could get 69% of our high school seniors to go on to college, and that they got $20.9 million in scholarship money. I also proved that we could create jobs with underground, with Southside Industrial Park, with a new airport expansion, and with businesses coming in from all over the world and exports going out from Georgia all over the world. The answer to Georgia's future is in education and in strong leadership that has proven they can deliver.
That's it. Senator Barnes.
This election is about change, for Georgia is changing. It's changing from the politics of asphalt to meet those needs that have arisen in Georgia. To maintain and expand our economic development, we must have adequately trained workers to fill the new jobs that are being attracted to Georgia. To do that, we must train and educate our failures of the past, our adult illiterates. We also need to make sure that our children that are presently being educated receive the education for the jobs of tomorrow. We must also protect our environment, for no longer can we tolerate the dumping of raw sewage into our rivers and streams in Georgia. It is my hope that in the near future, Georgia will be a state where you can drink the water, swim in the rivers, and eat the fish in any river or stream in Georgia.
Governor Maddox.
I have a past record so far as what we would do, because it's not something that I promised, but something has happened. We had, I think, the most open, representative, efficient, honest government in the history of this state, and I want to do that again. And I can do it. Not locking anybody out of government or opportunity in government, and bring in the production and make it a safer, a cleaner, and better place in which to live for all Georgians. That's my goal. I hope it is yours. I appreciate your support.
Representative Isaacson.
It's been said that our children are a message you and I send to a generation we will never see. As your governor, we'll do two important things for our state. We'll create a new partnership. First, a new partnership between government and the Georgia taxpayer to let them know we're going to spend their money efficiently, it's going to be prioritized, and the dream of a quality education for all will not be a promise, but it'll be a reality. And second, a partnership with the teacher in the classroom to ensure they'll have the support, the recognition, and the backing to deliver the job we expect. Georgia has had 124 years of the old partnership. It's time we had an open government that seeks the best of all our people, the highest priorities for our goals to be reached as we meet the dawn of the 21st century.
Representative McDonald.
As governor of Georgia, I would certainly like to see our state be a state that had strong reputations. I'd like for Georgia to be a state with a reputation that if you're going to do crime, you better pick you another state, because we're absolutely not going to put up with it. I'd like to see Georgia have the reputation of being a state that yet has committed itself to higher education, to technical education, and to our elementary and secondary programs. That reputation that we do what we intend to do and what we say we'll do. I'd like to see Georgia have the reputation continued that we're a very pro-business state with a very pro-business attitude. I want us to have the reputation of being a state that is protective of our natural resources and our environment. And yes, as a governor, I want to have the reputation of doing exactly what I said I would do, because bringing people together, doing these things and setting these goals that I hear from all Georgians, that's what I do best. And I want to have that type of reputation.
Mr. Wood.
I'm recently past chairman of the Board of Education in Gwinnett County. It's a rather large school system. We hire 500 new teachers each year, and the buses go around the world every day. I know education. It's one of the best school systems in the state of Georgia, possibly the best. I feel comfortable that I played a role in helping that to happen. But what I'd like to add before closing tonight is to say that there are a lot of children who are not going to have the opportunity of coming to our educational facilities in Georgia because they're being aborted. I'm the only pro-life candidate in the Republican primary. The other two are pro-choice. I feel that if you knock an apple off a tree, whether it's small and green or ripe and red, it's still an apple. And we need to do something about the 100 kids, future students, who are being aborted every day in the state of Georgia.
Lieutenant Governor Miller.
My name's kind of different, and as you've seen here tonight, so are some of my ideas, like the lottery for education. Another area in education where I differ from a lot of people up here at this platform is on sex education in school. You know, for years we've been teaching through driver's education what kids should do in the front seat. Now we should be teaching them what not to do in the back seat. Our teenage pregnancy in this state leads the southeast. Sexually transmitted diseases in Georgia, among the highest in the nation. As governor, I would implement a sex education program in each and every school, and I would get input from doctors and parents and teachers and preachers, and yes, you students yourselves.
Judge Ellis.
During the last few minutes, we've discussed the problems in education, law and order, environment, and economic growth and development. I hope you've learned during this program that all of these problems are in fact interrelated. If we can accept that, perhaps we can be more broad-minded in allocating our resources and setting our priorities. Hope you'll also notice that if there's a key to all of these problems, that key has to be education. A dollar spent on education will have a beneficial impact on the problems of dealing with crime, the environment, and economic growth. We must improve the educational system in the state of Georgia as a matter of the highest priority.
Thank you. Candidates and students, this forum has come to an end. We want to extend our thanks to the candidates. Thank you for being here, and we want to thank you for staying within our strict time limits, which were necessary because we had to limit the program to 1 hour. We want to thank our panel of student questioners for their excellent questions this evening, and we want to thank those of you who are in the audience here at the Capitol and those of you who are watching on television. I think we will all agree that projects like this one will help lead to a better informed electorate. I'm Judy Woodruff. I've enjoyed being here. Thank you all for watching, and goodbye from the Georgia State Capitol in Atlanta.